Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of Strange Origins. I'm very excited for you to join me this week, as I will be discussing an ancient monument that has puzzled generations of people, Stonehenge. This giant gathering of boulders, which is located 2 miles from Wiltshire, England, consists of 93 rocks, each around 13 feet high, 7 feet wide, and weighing around 25 tons. Today, Stonehenge attracts around 1 million tourists a year, making it easily one of England's most important historical sites. The stones that make up Stonehenge weigh around 30 tons, which is about 60,000 pounds. They were carved and placed together using tongue and groove joints that are usually only found in woodworking. Erecting each stone took around 50 years, making Stonehenge's construction in its entirety around 800 years in total. What fascinates me the most about its construction is that some of the stones were transported from 200 miles away from their final resting spot, which begs the question of how that was even possible. One of the main reasons I decided to include Stonehenge in my list of subjects this season is the simple fact that no one has all the answers when it comes to its origin. And due to recent archaeological excavations, everything we had previously thought about the stones has been challenged, leaving us with even more questions and even more room for theories. Something that is provable is that the rocks stand as an astrological calendar, showing at what time of year the solstices occur. One of the more famous stones in the circle goes by many names, sometimes heel stone, friar's heel, or the sunstone. This particular rock is 16 feet above ground, which is more than twice the height of a regular-sized human. During the summer and winter solstice, this is the rock that the sun is often photographed above, which is why it's called the sunstone. The reason for it being referred to friar's heel is a little more complicated. A folk tale tells the story that, quote, "The devil bought the stones from a woman in Ireland, wrapped them up and brought them to Salisbury Plain. One of the stones fell into the Avon, the rest were carried to the plain. The devil then cried out, 'No one will ever find out how these stones came here.' A friar replied, 'That's what you think,' whereupon the devil threw one of the stones at him and struck him on the heel. The stone stuck in the ground and is still there." Some believe Stonehenge to have simply been a burial place, while others think that it served more as a physical calendar and a way to keep track of the movements of the stars and planets. And some groups praise it simply for its significance as a place of worship, and even sacrifice. According to Mike Parker Pearson of Sheffield University, the reason for its construction is more spiritual in nature, with the road to the stone serving as a symbolic journey from life to death. Others theorize that those who built the structure believed the area to be a place of healing, which could account for the number of remains that have been found at the stones. In 1923, the bones of a 7th century Saxon man was dug from the site, who was also found to have been decapitated. And in 2013, an excavation team found the remains of 63 men, women, and children, some of who had severe signs of trauma. Something else that is strange about the rocks is that they have a certain acoustic property. With the stones consisting of both sandstone and bluestone, it's been noted that the blue stones emit a loud clanking noise when struck, and that ringing stones were thought by ancient cultures to possess magical properties. This would certainly explain why they were brought such a long distance, from the southern hills of Wales about 140 miles away. This would have been seemingly impossible at the time, only done through extremely laborious techniques, such as through the use of a line of logs that rolled under the stone, or by a greased track made of animal fat. Something else that leads experts to believe this theory is that the bluestones were likely taken from near a town in Wales called Miancanclog, which translates to mean ringing rocks. There, bluestones were used as church bells until the 18th century. During the Middle Ages, people speculated that the stones were placed there through Druid magic. As Christianity grew, attempts were made by certain cultures to avoid the place for hundreds of years, out of superstition. As carbon dating became more of a science, the bones found at Stonehenge were dated as older than previously thought, going all the way back to the Stone Age, which was thousands of years before the earliest records of Druids. Stonehenge serving as a sacrificial altar is also an accepted theory, and one that makes sense when taking archaeological digs into account. Something to take into account concerning the bones found at the site is that a majority of them were of young women and children, who have historically been more likely to be sacrificed. Though it's not clear whether the bodies found were killed due to sacrifice or the more likely cause of conflict, such as war or raiding, the fact that Stonehenge is shaped much like an altar makes one question. Following the Middle Ages, Stonehenge was at one point owned by King Henry VIII. Yes, that King Henry VIII. When he acquired Amesbury Abbey and the surrounding land, it was then passed on to the Earl of Hertford, to a Lord Carleton, and then to the Marquis of Queensberry. In 1824, the Antrobus family purchased it, and during the First World War, the Royal Flying Corps, which was the #1 school of aerial navigation and bomb dropping, was built just west of the circle. In 1915, Cecil Chubb bought the land for £6,600. He did so believing that a local man should own the property. 3 years later, it was donated to the government, and certain efforts to preserve it have taken place since then. What interests me the most about Stonehenge are the stories that make me believe that there could possibly be just a little bit of magic in the stones. One of these stories, which was brought to my attention by my father, is what made me so interested in the stones to begin with. In August 1971, 5 teenagers went to the stones to, quote, tap into the vibrations. After setting up camp, there was a flash of lightning and a storm rolled in. A local policeman on duty nearby at the time noticed that the stones were at that point surrounded by a strange circle of blue light, which then grew in brightness until it was blinding. Soon after, he heard screams coming from the stones, and then silence. The teenagers were nowhere to be found. In the 12th century, Geoffrey of Monmouth wrote in his book History of the Kings of Britain a story that connected Stonehenge with the famous wizard Merlin, who was featured extensively in the stories of Arthurian legends. In his story, it was giants who had brought the stones from Africa to Ireland for their healing properties. When a King Aurelius Ambrosius wanted to create a memorial for 3,000 soldiers who had been killed in battle against the Saxons, it was Merlin who suggested transporting Stonehenge to England. After Aurelius, Uther Pendragon, who is King Arthur's father in the stories, and then Constantine III, were all buried amidst the giant rocks of Stonehenge. According to legend, that is. Another legend involves a King Hengist, who ordered his soldiers to kill 420 men after inviting them to a feast under the pretense of peace. Hengist erected the stones as a monument to the slain men to show remorse for his deed. Surprisingly enough, there has been a modern battle at Stonehenge, albeit with a little less blood spilled than was common in the Middle Ages. The Battle of the Beanfield was a clash between New Age travelers and policemen in 1985. when around 600 travelers who were on their way to the annual Stonehenge Free Festival were stopped 7 miles away from the rocks because of a roadblock. Things became confrontational. It led to 1,300 police arresting 537 travelers, which was one of the biggest mass arrests in English history. There also were an additional 8 policemen and 16 travelers hospitalized. Today, neo-paganists have begun to reclaim the rocks as significant to their religion, though they are not the first reborn religion to lay claim to Stonehenge. In 1905, the Ancient Order of Druids, a neo-Druidic group, performed a mass initiation ceremony there, admitting 259 members into the order. Later on, the ceremony was mocked by local papers mercilessly for their decision to wear white robes and fake beards for the ceremony. Something else that struck me as odd when researching this topic was that Stonehenge isn't the only mysterious circle of stones in the world. In fact, there are more than 1,300 stone circles in England, Ireland, and France alone, which doesn't include the circles that litter the rest of the world. The Calendish stones of Scotland are among the most beautiful rocks, in my opinion, and are placed, like Stonehenge, with a stone in the circle that is surrounded by a circle formation of rocks that spread out. While some speculate that it serves the same purpose as Stonehenge, as a celestial and lunar observation center, local legend states that they were once giants frozen in time. In Israel exists the Rum El Hira, which translates to mean stone heap of the wild cat. A modern Hebrew name for it also translates to Wheel of the Spirits, as it is speculated that it is a place to worship the dead. It also serves as an ancient calendar, also during the 2 equinoxes of the year. In Brittany, France, there is a field of stones that are arranged as freestanding, almost like gravestones in a cemetery. Legend states that they were once soldiers, frozen over. And not only that, the similarly named Woodhenge also exists in Wiltshire, England, and the ditch around the strange arrangement of wood is thought to have been constructed around the same time frame as Stonehenge. A similar Woodhenge also exists in Germany, and is made up of 1,200 locust tree logs. Excavation at that site found a great number of bodies, including both the respectful burial of 13 men and the brutal burial of children and young women, who are believed to have been possible sacrifices. So with so much interest in a large circle of stones, so many spiritualist groups claiming it as their own, and numerous archaeological digs revealing there's more under the surface of Stonehenge than we previously thought, it makes one think, what all are the stones capable of? At least for me, there's something about a circle of rocks that inspires the imagination. Maybe it's my previous research of fairy rings, or the fact that I've watched Outlander one too many times. Either way, Stonehenge feels like a spiritual place to me. Somewhere you can contemplate existence, the concept of God, and the people who first thought to create such a monument. Maybe that's the secret of Stonehenge, that the people who painstakingly constructed the formation wished also to contemplate existence, the mysterious markings of the sky, to worship through their environment, and to maybe hopefully inspire future generations to do the same. Thank you for joining me through this little jaunt through English history. As always, everyone, stay safe out there, and remember, always keep it strange.